I want to welcome my viewers to the Visionary Leaders Mind podcast, actually a vodcast, I guess that's what they call it, where we explore the idea of what a visionary leader is, how they work, how their minds work, what it feels like, and how to develop that capability further in yourself. I'm still having to read it. I haven't got it memorized yet. My guest today is David Spacey, and I'm really glad to have you here, David.
Glad to be on.
Tell us what you're into, and if you want, the story of how you wound up with that.
Okay, the story of my life. So currently I'm the CEO of the ETF, which is the Economic Transition Foundation. And basically what that does is it's focused on, helping out, small business, which is the backbone of our economy, wherever you go geographically.
Yeah.
And making sure that we are supporting those businesses, especially in a non-traditional time that we live in, where everything has changed, starting from one of the main topics we're discussing today, the leadership overview. How does that work? If you're actually running a small business, a medium enterprise, a large cap company, if you're in politics, leadership in general, helping those individuals understand the finance and economic sense of things, and then helping them financially in what makes sense and giving them the right guidance to be able to actually, stay up, get up on their feet and understand the trends of what's happening in the market. It's much of a interesting kind of dynamic that we have, where it's a nonprofit, and at the same time it has a lot of subsidiaries. So it's a nonprofit and it's a for-profit organization at different levels and legal entities. And the idea is we can subsidize a lot of the help that usually for-profit organizations cannot, or clients cannot, or people who need help cannot actually pay for. So we're at the same level of quality, of course, but with a new idea of understanding of how do things work now. We're in a different kind of era where things are not the same as they used to be before. 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2 anymore. There's more to it today. As funny as that might sound, and you're the most who understands what that means. But things are different. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to be creative in a way, innovative in a way, and kind of channel through this energy and this understanding to people who need it, and to people who can actually best learn it, utilize it, and go forward with it. So that's in a nutshell what I'm doing today, and what in terms of background prior to that, it's more in the corporate universe, doing a lot of corporate finance, economics, and at work, trend analysis, and what have you, and a big emphasis on the personal side of doing business. However, as I said before, I always go ahead, I'm not going to be too long now, but I always go ahead, and talk about the difference between, pre-pandemic or pre-whatever happened, post-pandemic, because there are two different universes there. And we have to understand that, and people who can understand and take it in are the most people who are susceptible to actually, learn and move forward with the new trends that are taking place, and open their minds to what we don't understand today, or what we rejected, to ingest before, in terms of what things are and what things might be.
What I hear you say, let me kind of give it back to you, is your organization and you take in all the economic data that's there, distill it down, and translate it for people to learn from, so that they can be more efficient in educating themselves. Because the economic world, actually one of my hobbies has been for decades, macroeconomics. So I watch the trends, what it takes, the courage it takes to make some of the adjustments in the macro economy at the federal level, and then look at the ramifications that it has across what are the consequences if we make this tweak? If we raise the interest rates 50 basis points, half a percentage point, what are the consequences and ramifications across the country and in everybody's lives as well as their businesses? And we need what you do. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. If I may just inject a little story here about how some people or individuals are, available to the learning curve and some are not. And what do I mean, or what do we mean by trends? So in order to pay attention to trends, it means that you have to let go of the academic point of view of macroeconomics. Let's talk economy, right? So let go of the macroeconomic point of view, the academic point of view, and actually be more open-minded to look at trends. So we all understand from academic point of view and historical point of view that everything is cyclical. It's a period of time, it's a timeline where you would see the same events kind of revolving in the same loop over and over a long timeline, regardless if it's 60 years, 100 years, what have you. But what bothers me the most is that, I would just give this quick example. A few days ago or weeks ago, I wrote some comment about economy on LinkedIn, and just to show that the purpose of this example is just to show how some people are ready and some people are not. And I put in that, we're already in a recession, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
And I was attacked fiercely by many people who accused me of having political agendas, trying to freak people out and do what have you. And people who, with all due respect to everybody, I'm not a medical doctor who's saying I'm a specialist on something. I've had a long education on this. I have a long-term experience of this. But when you are attacked left and right from different, prospects who are telling you that you have, of course, 80% would be support and people understanding which is the great news. But when you see the resistance and the accusations, which becomes personal sometimes it just makes me wonder, and that's something I want to discuss with you today. Is that why? Is it because those individuals, which I respect a lot, because we respect all spectrum of opinions, and that's the way it should be. However, this attack or these attacks, are they based on this residual kind of, holding on and grabbing to the old school way of thinking, or what could it be?
So let me lay this out. This is really weird, and I apologize to my listeners for how I got to this, but one of my other hobbies is astrology, because I want to understand people. I've also studied birth order, right? And there's a book out on that's quite brilliant that I want people to read, the birth order book. But what I got to was this: I watch my clients and their ability to absorb new information and move with it and take action. And so what you're describing is 3 different levels of, that I got to at least, 3 different levels of learning ability in life. And even if they have I have some friends that have an avid desire and push to learn in their life, but they can't move any faster than if they were just sitting still. I mean, it's amazing to me, but they work really hard at it to transfer. So in astrology, there are fixed signs, there are cardinal signs, and there are mutable signs. I happen to be a mutable sign. And so what I learned from that was, and Socrates has this terrific quote that I love. It's one of my favorites right now. Socrates said, there are smart people learn from everyone and everything, which is what you're describing as the people who are willing to absorb things. Ordinary people learn from their experiences, and stupid people already have the answers. And so what I describe that is you can learn from the whispers, which is what I work diligently to teach my clients how to do. Learn from the whispers. Learn from the things you wake up with in the middle of the night or in the shower. That's intuition, which is kind of the whole point of this, of this podcast. Learn from your intuition, learn from your dreams, learn from watching people around you. That's the first level of learning. The second people level is people have to learn from push effort in and see what the results are. So they learn from the interactions. And the third level of learning that I describe is people have to learn one brick wall at a time. It's like, okay, there's this brick wall. These are the consequences. You're headed toward it at 60 miles an hour. Boom, they hit it and they go, what happened? I said, you remember when I said this? You remember when you thought that, right? That was actually gonna happen. So you can learn from life one brick wall at a time or not. I prefer less pain.
I totally agree with that. This makes me kind of segue in a way to the acceptance kind of terminology or concept. We were talking about, like I mentioned, the pre-pandemic, post-pandemic kind of different times we're living in, right? So let's talk post-pandemic for a second. Hopefully we're out of that, right? So if the level of acceptance is only pending on or dependent on whatever controls and offerings that were provided within the pandemic and post-pandemic, and we just take that in and stick with it, then we're losing a great window of opportunity to actually open our eyes and look at the opportunity that we have today. And I'm talking across the board. Today we are living in a totally ever-changing, universe, and things are totally different. So accepting and opening our eyes to what's new and what could be new, and not to be stuck on what was introduced to be the new, is extremely important. I hope I'm making sense, but to your listeners as well. And I'm sure that probably you can help me, probably explain this even better. But going back to the idea of trends, right? The trend, if you look at the slope of just let's talk business for now for a second. Look at all verticals in the marketplace and look at the trends that they followed, and look at the trends pre-pandemic and look at the trends post-pandemic, and look at the human capital part, which is the human beings who are fulfilling those jobs and those universes within those verticals. You would see that pre is something that we already knew. We knew the standards. Even the economy made sense from a specific point of view, which was mostly academic. And you just mentioned how you increase the Fed increases the interest rate by so and so, and what are the expected ramifications of that? If they lower the interest by so and so, and what are the expected ramifications of that? Today, that doesn't work the same way. Today, you have to look at the new trends. And in order to understand the new trends in the marketplace, you have to have some sort of intuition, right? Which is something that I'm learning from you, and you have mentioned so many times. Intuition. Intuition, from my perspective, is how do I, as a leader in the marketplace today, and I hope I'm seen as a leader in the marketplace today, how do I actually have the sixth sense or the intuition, if you will, that is helping me understand the ever-changing market, the ever-changing circumstances, and how does that help us in making the right decisions today and opening our eyes in order for the following days to have the better results that we're looking for, that are suitable for the situation that we're looking at. That's extremely important from my perspective, and I hope from the perspective of many who are in a position to actually make a little difference. Otherwise, if we stick to the traditional ways, we're stuck in the past, and it's going to be a blast of the past. Nothing's going to work out. Oh. And you can see this, with many examples today. However, you have many other examples that we can see as role models and, things to learn from or to be influenced by as well.
So, David, one of the things that another hobby, if you would, that I have, I'm a researcher. It's like in my cells, right? My DNA. one of my hobbies is cultural anthropology. So that is long-term evolution of a culture. So if you take the evolution of Europe from about 600 AD down through the Viking process, down across the whole, Vikings went clear down to Turkey, Constantinople, clear across both the British Isles, and they accomplished things the Romans couldn't do. And so they went through that, the evolution of that, and all of their thought process. That's an interesting study to me. But our current situation and what we're calling the consequences in our economy and our culture right now isn't just the hibernation that we had to go through as a result of COVID and the pandemic. It started before. The labor situation we have right now is a direct result of 4 previous years of immigration laws changing in this country. And there were short-term good consequences, and the long-term negative consequences are, we don't have enough workers. And the employers that I work with, literally across the country, aren't finding good people. So we've had culture change in quality of work ethic. We've had culture change as far as willingness to work, and we've had other things that are involved. So Americans are in the process. I'm going to post it tomorrow because I got to go back and find it. I watched a YouTube on the culture loops that happen and all the things that happen. This guy studied 600 years worth of, maybe 800 years of European culture and the dominant, the US is dominant right now. You just said you had a lot of reaction to some people saying, we're started into a recession. The recession started back a ways. People just didn't know it. It's already, we're in it. But most people, I look at my own experience, most people don't understand that they're in a recession until they're in pain from it.
That totally makes sense.
That's the middle level of learners.
And that's usually the broader majority of people who would actually acknowledge it. It's only when the pain is inflicted. And I totally agree with this statement. I totally agree with that.
So if we break the population into quadrants, right? The top quadrant are the eager learners. The middle half is the ordinary normal learners, and the bottom quarter are the deeply, resistant, if you would, violently regressive. They want to stay the way they were, and the world will never stay that way. So the point of this podcast is to help people understand that we have, by design, because I study underlying design of human beings and business and all of that perpetually. I started this in my 20s, but I watch people in who they are. Our minds, I watch myself, I'm the biggest beaker since I'm a researcher, right? The former chemist. I'm the beaker I study the most because it's closest, right? And then I study my clients and the people around me. So I watch how they think and the results they create. And the reason why I came up with the name, I had somebody ask me, actually my first guest, Allison DeFord, asked me at one point in our conversation, she said, Brad, what do you know that nobody else knows? I know that in order to be a visionary, dynamic leader, and the big ones in my mind are, the founding fathers of this country. They were amazing people, but they were all part of a group, the Masons, that did deep internal work, and they had a similarity of thought process. They knew how to develop intuition. So a visionary leader requires not just an active, highly intelligent, analytical mind, but it also requires deep intuition, the ability to see not just, like a gut feel is a little bitty tickle compared to what it is when you're deeper into it. It's like to be able to see what's your natural time horizon. How far into the future can you see in depth? I read a book which I have posted on my website, called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Rumelt. And what he says is, look at the whole market and really study it before you jump. But when you jump, once you've studied the market, you have a pretty good idea into the future of how things are going to be. That takes intuition and that takes depth. So I'm going to ask you, David, wander back into this process. Of the visionary leaders that we've had that you hold kind of in high esteem, can you name one or two? And let's talk about how they're different than most of the rest of us ordinary people.
Well, I'm going to mention one that most people might agree with, but I'm going to describe why I think it would be kind of confusing even to me to understanding why this person is at that level. And I'm talking about Elon Musk.
Yes, we all.
But yes. So I do really respect and I'm fascinated with the great ideas and visions that are, most of them are translated into businesses and facts. However, I have my own point of view, which I'm contradicting myself here because I've always, ever since I was a child, I'm looking for a role model. I'm looking for something that's different. So looking for something that's way advanced to learn from. And it's very hard to find, and it's more of a personal perspective, right? But when I saw this man, I thought what he's doing is amazing. Then I took a step back and I thought, does it really take a great vision supported by billions of dollars in order to be able to make it happen? Because if this is the case, then I can give you an example of 10,000 people that have great visions and great intuition, but it never materializes because they don't have the means to make it happen. So to answer the first part of your question, I would say Elon Musk, but to contradict myself and take a step back, which I have to, because I can't give a clear-cut answer to this. But to be honest, I still believe that, with all due respect, that there are many people who have great visions. And historically, I forgot the name of the gentleman who came up with a car that runs on water. And there was a gentleman who, which separates hydrogen from oxygen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've read about that.
And that guy disappeared at some point in time. And that was years and years ago. And at some point, there was an electric car that was introduced prior to the Tesla days.
Right.
And that kind of, and someone like me who's very analytical in the way I think, and many other people, I was thinking probably the oil industry. And there are so many reasons why this is happening. It's not happening. Maybe it's not time for this introduction. So my point is, I do believe that there are, to be fair, many influential and intuitive, positive, intuitive individuals out there. But sadly, it's very difficult to hear of them or to see their achievements that materialize as opposed to, or as a result of the lack of resources available or lack of exposure that's been, or the lack of the appropriate time of which this introduction had taken place.
Right.
So I think that's, I just wanted to put this out there. So, but to answer again, that first part of your question, I would say Elon Musk, because at least in terms of results and vision, I can see a visionary there who's always, it seems like Musk has 2 steps ahead. He's always 2 to 10 steps ahead of anyone else. But I do kind of tie this to the material part or the resources part, which helps it a lot to happen. Of course, you can be a multi-billionaire and you have all the resources on earth and all the leverage that you need, but if you didn't have intuition, I mean, you're going to go nowhere. And we've seen many examples of that, right? So that would be my answer to your question. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Well, I'm going to add a piece to it because you've laid it out here. I like it a lot. So what you're describing is there's a book, Rocket Fuel, by, let me think, Wickman, I believe. And they describe two types. They need the visionary. They describe a visionary in an entrepreneurial business, or any business really. You gotta have the visionary, but you've also got to have what they describe as an integrator. In other words, not just great vision, because if you have just great vision and take no action, you're just a dreamer, right? So if you've got vision, and so it takes three pieces. It takes resources, as you've described, but it doesn't have to be yours. Vision, action, tactical action, and resources are what are required in order to do, to make significant changes. Stephen Jobs is another one that just changed our world. And, Jeff Bezos is doing quite a bit the same thing with the Amazon process. And, we need these people to wake us up. They look outside the box. And so use your vision to kind of look outside the box. So analytical is where tactical action takes place. Emotions are where drive and ambition take place. Intuition is different parts of the brain and different levels, and I can describe that, and it takes all three of those pieces and the resources in order to make things happen.
If I may ask you a question, if you don't mind. So I do remember when Google first came out, and prior to the bubble and the tech bubble and what have you, the stock explosion. I do remember that Yahoo, and I hope that most of your listeners still remember Yahoo, which still exists today. I think they were not simultaneously growing at the same time, but there was a very short gap of timeline between both. However, my question is, what, taking intuition into consideration, and taking, understanding the playground and doing your research and the background, fulfillment to an extent, and then using your intuition for the future and knowing what should work, what should not. How would you, what would be the reason why Google made it, as opposed to, I'm not saying that Yahoo didn't make it. However, Yahoo is not Google. It's size-wise or, user base wise. So what is it that, and they were both very successful within the tech bubble that took place back then. But what would be or could be the reasons that actually drove Google all the way to the top, as opposed to an organization that started at the same level, if you will,
right? Actually,
within the same timeline.
Right. Actually, Yahoo started before, time-wise, by a year or so. I think the difference, I think there's actually a whole book involved in what you've just asked, literally, just a whole book involved in that, both sides of that kind of evolution. It could be, because I don't know, it could be the time horizon and breadth that the people in Yahoo couldn't achieve that the gentleman in Google did. Okay, so depth and breadth, right? If I am deeper into my intuition, I'm able to, and literally it feels this way, it's like I'm able to correlate more information at the same time, and also further into the future, so even more information. So if you take, the ability, I can see almost all my market, good strategy, bad strategy. I can see almost all my market, maybe 75% of it, and I can see it for 2 years and get the consequences 2 years out. That would be maybe not the Yahoo model, but close to it as an analogy. And the Google gentleman could see 95% of their market and 3 to 3.5 years into the future, and maybe even 10 years into the future at the edges of it. And so that's probably 4 times as much information. It would be interesting to know what time of the day that those things showed up in their mind, how they used their minds. when I was in analytical chemistry. So that's the answer to my question, to your question, just a smaller field of view. And part of the reason why I get hired is because literally I sell insight. I work with my clients, I talk through their issues, and I give them things that are outside their box that they can't get to yet. And literally, that's what I do. So I sell intuition.
I love your answer, which makes a lot of sense. And if I may add a little piece that I just recalled, intuition, which is your field, and what we're discussing mostly is something that's amazing and it reaps great results. But sometimes in the Google versus Yahoo case, I think intuition and sneakiness was kind of simultaneous in a way. Here's what
describe sneakiness to me.
Okay, so let me say it this way. Let me describe it. So I think that Google had whoever, I really don't have names over the top of my head, but I think that what happened is that whoever was making the decisions at Google had the sneaky intuition, let's put it this way,
okay,
to understand that turning Google into a catch-all kind of technology, which required a huge leverage and a huge investment in the technological infrastructure,
yep,
would be the intuition that took Google, milestones ahead of Yahoo and any other. And I remember there were like 2 or 3 other players in the market back then.
There were.
I forgot the names, but I think those are gone.
Yep, they are.
But I think so. That's probably one of the best. We're just having this conversation. I asked the question, it just came to mind. I think that's one of the best intuition in leadership kind of examples, or I call intuition sneakiness, because at that time, nobody would have thought. I mean, I think it's genius to have thought that creating a catch-all kind of search engine, and how much investment does that require in the tech infrastructure to make that happen. I think that's sneaky, because in order to have that kind of knowledge or seeing is brilliant.
Yeah.
So I think I just honestly, I'm just thinking about this, and I think that would be the greatest example of intuition in leadership that we can relate to. And I hope I'm right about the events, but I think that's what happened. And I just kind of remembered this based on your answer. And I think that is the greatest way of looking forward of what is great intuition. So I said sneaky intuition. What I meant by that is that when no one else even thought about it.
Right.
It just happened.
That's the brilliance of it, right? So
right.
It allows you to. So I'm going to go through a description here. We have each human being has a consciousness. They have an I, right? Everyone has memory. We have emotions. We have an analytical mind that thinks words and numbers. I know because I had a concussion that took out my front left lobe, and I couldn't figure out how to go from point A to point B for a period of time. It was pretty freaky. 2 years it took me to recover that. But so we have the analytical mind for words and numbers, and then concepts happen in the intuitive mind. And then we have the individual subconscious mind, which is actually supposedly 90% of our mind. And then we have the collective unconscious. And I don't think I've read any papers on this, but my theory is there are progressive circles in the subconscious mind that encompass smaller, bigger and bigger groups. My family, my close friends, my city, and out and out and out. People that I know, people that I don't know. And so that's the collective unconscious until you get to, the spiritual side where it goes into the collective unknown, right? So that's the levels of who we are. The intuitive mind as a concept engine, it only thinks in concepts. direct knowing. I know what that is. If you look up the definition of intuition, it's direct knowing without access to the analytical mind. That's the definition, right? So without analytical words and numbers thinking, point A, point B, point C, it can go from point A, collect all the thoughts in between there and Q, and then collect all the thoughts between Q and Z and cover the whole distance in 2 bumps. That's the intuitive mind. And the intuitive mind, what I learned to do when I was an analytical chemist was hold open a question that I had that I didn't have a solution for, map out all the pieces that I did actually concretely know, hold out that puzzle piece, and then go take a 20-minute nap and wake up with the solution, which is what I've done is drop down into the deepest part at that time, the deeper part of my intuitive mind, and give access to my intuitive mind to absorb the insights from my subconscious. That's what I'm describing as the mechanisms for people using being a visionary leader. And they have that so that eventually they get to the place where those are active intuitions in the middle of their waking state. And that can be taught. So that's the whole point of this. We can learn these things.
Yeah. So Brad, a quick question. So how do you train me, someone like me, or how do you train someone on being more intuitive?
There's 3 different levels I got to go through. One is a brain, and thank you for the question. First, we have to look at the brain and how it functions. There's 5 different brainwave levels. I'm not too familiar with gamma right now, but beta is where we do our analytical thinking. Alpha is where we do our daydreaming. That's the ideas pop in the shower sort of thing, driving down the road. When you're doing something routine, you shift out of beta and you can allow your brain to go into the alpha brainwave level. That's when ideas pop in, at least some. Theta is most of a sleep cycle, and delta is the bottom 30 minutes of a 90-minute sleep cycle. So you go in, you're in theta, you drop down into delta, then you come back out. So that's a hour and a half sleep cycle. In order to teach you how to be this way, I would have you meditate, and there's several different methods, but what you're doing is you're training your awareness to recognize when you're actively thinking something and when you're not actively thinking something, but it shows up. And that's the first step to teach you how to use your intuitive mind and recognize it when it's active. Okay, so there's some individual training involved or group training involved, right? For how it feels, what it looks like, what's the experience of the intuitive mind. Then with a meditation and some breathing exercises, you change the energy movement in your body, because we're not just physical beings. I describe the human being physical body as the telephone at the end of the telephone system, right? It's the part you pick up and listen to. It's the part you can physically actively interact with, but it's not anywhere near a fraction of who you are. So, and there's ways to measure that.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So train your brain so that it can, right now, I know for a fact, and one of my phone calls today is to an organization that can get me the equipment to measure my brain waves. I run in alpha, beta, alpha, and theta right now, all the time. So I might as well be asleep for my ability to have access to my subconscious.
Okay? So you mean that you're running those simultaneously?
Simultaneously across the hemispheres of my brain, both sides, simultaneously puts you in the state where your whole brain is running at that. So beta, alpha, theta, and sometimes with focus, and I have to kind of lose a little bit of interaction with the world, delta. But when you can do that consciously, it means you've got deep into intuition. And I've had periods of time where I'm doing deeper either meditation or other exercises, energy movement exercises, where I have access to delta 100% of the time, and it feels different. It's like I'm expanded into this big ball of energy that's somewhere between, 50 feet and 100 feet across, and that's the short end of it.
So what is the optimum point that someone should reach to in order to have that intuitive kind of sense heightened, or at its optimum force, if you will?
To be able to hold. So when you wake up, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you've got these bright ideas, and you write them down, right?
Right.
You lose them. That you're in theta brain.
Well, just something funny. I write them down, then lose my notes. But please go ahead.
That's funny, David. Theta is where we are when we just hit consciousness after we've been asleep. So when you get to the place where you can hold open theta all the time, you feel differently. Your thinking feels differently. You're in concept only. I can easily move into whole long periods of time where I'm only thinking concepts only. I never think words in those periods. So that's the deepest part of it that I've been experienced so far. I don't know. Maybe there's other people that have experienced further. I know there have to be, because there's more. But it's a design factor for us to be able to learn those. We have gurus in India and Tibet that run like, in China, up in the mountains that learn how to run these things all the time. And it's time for us in this Western culture to wake up and realize there's a tool for us to use that most of us don't even have any idea that's there, that it can be grown. And it's our job to learn how to grow it. So meditation, breathing, or call me. I'm going to start a class.
That's beautiful. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So what does it take? Should someone have specific, I'm sorry, I'm asking you the questions, but that's the last one. Are there any, should I have an aptitude kind of test or some sort of aptitude to be able to learn this? Or is everybody able to reach that level with the proper training and education?
With proper training, it takes some people. We talked about 3 different types of learners. We've got 3 different types of people, and they can really so first off, they have to be committed to it. It's not a short thing. It takes anywhere from a minimum of 6 months of daily effort to see a difference to 2 to 3 years of daily effort. Okay, that's one possibility. And so if you have to have commitment, right? But then, man, I just forgot your question. Like, bang, gone.
No. It's like how much of an aptitude should someone have in order to be able trainable, to be trainable?
Can we measure
to reach that level of intuitive,
So Myers-Briggs has this second set of, first one is introvert or extrovert. The second one is N or S. And that means you have, and you can go get that online. But N, if you're above break even, if you would, on the N, you have that tendency. If you're halfway up, you've got a very strong, easily trained tendency to be intuitive because you already are. Okay. If you're in the S, you can grow into it, but it takes longer and more effort. That's what my experience. I had a class that I taught for 8 years, and I would run everybody through the Myers-Briggs before at the front of the class so that I would know where they'd fall out and whether they were going to stick or not. It's hard work. It's not easy. This takes patience. Like, how am I going to teach myself to be? The other piece that comes with this, because the energy to take to change the nervous system is not just the brain, the whole nervous system takes character development. If you don't do character development simultaneously, you'll blow things up. That's not fun either. So,
this makes great sense. I don't know how much time we still have. Probably this would be a conversation for a different day, but here's what I have to say. You just made me think of something. The value proposition that an individual has to provide, meaning the intuition that I can have as, let's say, a dictator
yeah,
is totally different. And I think I'm right. than the intuition that I might have as a man of God, hypothetically speaking, right? Because the intuition that you would have as a man of God, which, hypothetically speaking, again, that would be, more of a positive intuition and more of a constructive intuition and what have you. But, from a dictator perspective, it would be more of an intuition of, okay, if I take over this whole planet, then things will be great and this will happen and that will, fall into place. So I think the value proposition, which I think is a huge, aspect to discuss, and I don't think in a few minutes we can cover that, right? But I think that's something that is rarely discussed, and less focus is shed on that in terms of how important the value, and which we had a discussion before about that briefly, the value proposition or the value that the person proposes within the context of this intuition that's going to be projected. So what is the angle that you're projecting this intuition from, right? And what does this intuition look like based on your value, intentions, and what have you? It is mind-boggling, because that's such a deep thought. I don't even know where to start to think about this.
Let me throw this, because we're going to have to wrap this up, but let me throw this out. I have discovered that every thought I have, every action I take, every emotion that I have, positive or negative, has a purpose. In my subconscious, I hold purpose, not consciously, unconsciously, for every positive or negative reaction, right? The whole structure of my character is built around purpose. And so my purpose is to, what's the purpose of my business? And if you think carefully about it, it's not just to make money, it's to create meaning, and hopefully positive meaning. So you've got the difference. I would differentiate between.
But that's you, Brad, because you're a good guy. But I'm talking about the bad guy.
We'll find out, right?
Right.
But we have, to go back to your dictator statement, right? We have benevolent dictators somewhere in history, I'm sure we have, right? And we have, those are the monarchs, right? We have dictators that are negative, and dictators and narcissists, if you would, and dictators that are positive and benevolent for the people. So your whole statement about what's the purpose of them, what's the direction that they kind of launch from, that's important. The ground that you've built in your mind, at the analytical mind, and your whole emotional state and your whole character sets the tone for what you're willing to receive in your intuitive mind. Which part of the box have you got, I've got the right side of my box knocked down, the one in front of me knocked down, but the one on my left and one on back are not, they're still standing and block me in, right? So maybe we ought to have that discussion. We'll do that.
I think it would be interesting to do so.
It would. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you, David, very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and your insights, and of course, your questions. They were great, right?
Thank you, Brad.
Right.
I mean, I really enjoyed this so much.
Well, we have to have adventures. This is the one. Thank you. So thank you for being on the Visionary Leaders Mind podcast. I'm still going to read this. And for my listeners, remember, keep pursuing your dreams and learning. Be part of that upper group, right? Be willing to learn from everyone and everything so that you can guide this world with your insights, epiphanies, and hidden brilliance, because we need your visionary mind. Thank you very much.